Hey, a couple people, I want to go ahead and get this started, and I am recording this so that those that couldn't make it will get a copy of it to go over. And basically, this is a monthly meeting that we're having with the membership advocates and the AG and anybody else that we can get to join that we feel needs to be excited about membership in District 7720. This week or this month, we invited Terry Weaver, who is a past district governor from South Carolina, Greenville area, right? Terry? Yeah.
Right.
He is also an assistant Rotary coordinator, and he has the sole job of dealing with data. And he's been doing this for, well, probably your life.
5 years.
Yeah, but you do this as a job too, right? As studying data, and it's not up my alley. But after attending probably close to 5 years of Terry's meetings, I'm starting to understand it. So I'm sure you guys will catch on much quicker than I did. I have a comptroller in my house, and thankfully I get to sleep in the same bedroom as she does. But the numbers do well with me. I'll draw you a picture, but I can't do you a chart. Terry's going to talk about how important the history of our membership in each club is, and how it affects everything going forward, and how predictable that history has made the membership in our clubs, and especially in our district, and what's going to happen. Also joining us is Claudia Canaday. She is what is your actual title, Claudia?
She's an assistant coordinator as well.
Yeah, that's right. Assistant zone coordinator.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute. Yeah, assistant Rotary coordinator.
Right. And she is from the Raleigh area?
I'm from Greensboro. 7690.
Okay. One of the big cities over there. So also we have, besides MAs and AGs here, we have district governor, our district governor-elect, and we also have our district communications officer, that DB guru, to be Barbara Bryan. One of our MAs, actually two of them are past district governors. Myself, I'm an MA for Area 1, and Frank Jackwick, well, not the immediate past district governor anymore, are you? Right. He is the MA for Area 2. So a lot of people on here wear multiple hats, and that's the Rotary way. Once you find that you're excited about Rotary, we're going to get everything we can out of you. So that's kind of how it works, and we're usually happy to do that. So Terry, really, I'm going to turn it over to you so we don't waste any more time. It's all yours.
Okay. While I'm getting my screen shared, if all of you would mouse down to the lower left corner of your screen and mute yourself. I want to point out that you can unmute yourself using the space bar, just like a push-to-talk microphone. So I'll invite you to ask questions as we go, sort of, rather than save them up. Confirm everybody can see my screen. Thumbs up on that. Great. All right. So let's get started. The first segment this evening is about this whole question of identifying membership challenged clubs. This came out of a project that Chris Jones commissioned me with about 5 years ago. He had seen some of the data that I had put together on my own district and said, I wonder if that's portable to other districts. More importantly, I wonder if we can turn that into something predictive. Now, you've seen the video, so I'm not going to replay all of that for you, but I do want to touch some of the high points. and that is that attrition is a fact of life in membership organizations. It's a part of every membership organization. The average U.S. Trade Association, for example, loses members at about 15% a year. I learned from a friend of mine, Rotarian, in the insurance business, that the average property casualty insurance agency, Allstate, et cetera, loses its customers at about a rate of 15% a year. So I went and pawed into this a little bit more, and I found out that the average residential alarm company turns over its customers at about a rate of 15% a year. So we're as good as anybody and better than some in that respect. The other thing that's emerged as we started watching this year after year is I thought it would be true, but I now have the data, that these attrition rates are remarkably consistent in a given club. Now they're widely variable between clubs, like a factor of 10, but for any given club, unless something different happens, that's always the caveat, unless something different happens, a club is going to drop about the same number of members each year. Now, retention, which is widely believed in Rotary to be the key to success, the retention is essential, but think about it. Retention is highly overrated as a growth strategy. You cannot retain your way from 15 to 20 members. Sooner or later, you have to figure out how to attract one. But it's absolutely, undeniably true that for every member you keep, it's a member you don't have to replace. So the question is attrition predictable? And this question was actually raised by your neighbor, John Skybel, about 10 days ago. And since I was doing this session for you, I thought I'd look at it for you as well. He said, how does our attrition last year, 2019-20, compare with your forecast? My forecast being based on a 3-year average attrition. Well, here's how it works out for 7720. 40% of the clubs in 7720 had attrition in 1920 within plus or minus 1 member. 0 plus or minus 1 of the 3-year average prediction. Amazing correlation. Even more amazing, 65% of your clubs, their attrition for that single year, 1920, with COVID, was within 1 or 2 members of the forecasted, which was based again on the 3-year average. And then if you stretch that out a little bit further, we cover 90% of the clubs if we say we can predict with certainty, plus or minus 4 members, how many your club will lose in the course of a year. I also made the comment, which is on its way to you. I'm just publishing the membership stats for the week that all of you get. Every district I've looked at so far, which is not a lot, I've been tied up with some other things, but we didn't see COVID-related attrition. That didn't get in our way this year. What got in our way was our clubs going out of business for a couple of months and not yet figuring out how we're going to attract members in this virtual world that we're now hopefully temporarily in. So our membership losses, by and large, in Zone 33 were related to not attracting members for the sweet spot months of March, April, and May. So what we discovered out of this is that it is not at all random in terms of who's going to grow and who's going to fail as far as membership is concerned. There's a better than 80% correlation between growing clubs and continuing to grow. You've heard success breeds success. It's unfortunately also true that failure breeds failure. The clubs that have continuously declined over the past will continue to decline in the future. And again, we have now 4 years of stats to back this up. Then there's a group of clubs holding their own. Now, growth is defined as more than a 5% gain over 3 years, not 5% a year, but a net 5% gain over 3 years. So that'd be a 40-member club that finished the end of 3 years at 42 or better. Likewise, a declining club, that same club would have fallen into the decline group if they'd been at 38 at the end of 3 years. And of course, anything in between is that fragile balance of trying to hold your own, which is like really trying to balance a Rotary club on the edge of a knife blade. We've used the term in the zone attrition. The term everywhere else in Rotary is retention. And there's a reason for that. Retention is seen by Evanston as being positive. attrition is negative, which you don't want to do in a membership organization. The trouble is that there's a clarity problem. Obviously, the two numbers are exactly the same. Your attrition is just 100% minus your retention or vice versa. But if you talk to a club and say your club has a retention rate of 86% and you're only attracting members at a rate of 12%, that is beyond the math skills of the average American. People just look at you just like a blank stare. On the other hand, if you talk in terms of comparable numbers, your attrition rate's 14 and your attraction rate's 12, people get that instantly. So that's why we're talking about attrition. It's exactly the same thing as retention, just the reciprocal. 100 minus retention is attrition. So we've learned that attrition is real, and what's incredible about it is how consistent it is. Our zone 33 average is 14.1. Your district is 14.0. RI for 17-18 was 14.1. Actually, the 18-19 stats, I didn't dig those back up, but I think it's 13.8 for 18-19. And I also put world class up here, and this is observational. Observational meaning that hardly any clubs lose members at rates lower than 10%. You'll occasionally see an 8, and we've got some special cases here we'll look at in your district. But it looks like that's about as good as you can get. In other words, life happens to members, and particularly in a demographic like ours, life happens at a rate apparently of about 10%. So chances are totally beyond control of your club. You're going to lose about 10% of your members, and the rest of the threshold above that is something you can control. Clubs, now this is the lesson here, guys. Clubs with already low attrition, if your attrition rate's already at 8 or 10 or 12%, you can't keep members any better than that. You can't get any better. You can hug them, you can do whatever you want. That might not be so good right now, but you're not going to do any better at attrition. And if you're not growing and your retention and your attrition rates in the 10-12% range, then it's obviously you're not asking anybody to join your club. And we certainly got data to that effect. Now, that being said, with those averages in the, say, 14% range, it would suggest that numbers north of 15% need some attention. And frankly, numbers north of 20 and 25% need a lot of attention. And we'll look at some of those cases in your district. So once again, retention's overrated as a growth strategy, but absolutely essential as a part of maintaining your membership and not requiring, shall we say, replacement members for those members we can hold on to. At the end of the day, it's about the club experience. And so the club experience is a good thing overall. It has a nice side effect of retaining members. But the more excited people are about Rotary, the more likely they are to stay, and the more likely they are to invite someone else to join. It almost goes without saying, but we always do. You have to attract members faster than you lose them. And more importantly, for yourself as an audience, we need to know the history of these clubs when we go into a club with the intent of helping them. So essential to solving problems, which has been a career for me. I'm an engineer by training and by career path. Engineers are compulsive problem solvers. They just can't leave one alone. But I've learned that you need to know exactly what problem you're trying to solve. The first thing you want to do when the light doesn't come on in the bedroom is figure out whether the power's out in the neighborhood, or if it's just the bedroom, or if it's just the house. So knowing what problem you're trying to solve is really essential. Knowing whether it's an attrition problem, an attraction problem, or perhaps both. The other possibility is neither. You have clubs that have neither of those problems, haven't had for some time, and are in that group that's continuing to grow. Now, I always like to select problems that I think I can solve. So knowing exactly where and how big the problems are is also essential to knowing where to deploy your effort. We got a limited number of heartbeats we can put to trying to help these Rotary clubs. Let's figure out where we can make the most impact. What are the growth clubs? The clubs that we really don't have to spend too much time with. Just encourage them and give them the tools and get out of their way. Who are the declining clubs? Who are the clubs that are really killing us with respect to membership? And then who are the ones in the middle? In that fragile balance, what you'll notice each year is clubs move in there from the decline group, they move in there from the growth group, and they move out both directions as well. What we want to have happen, of course, in that yellow line, that fragile balance group, we want to teach them to grow rather than fall into that chronic membership decline. So let me stop right there and just unmute yourself, hit your space bar if you have any questions up to this point.
Terry,
Yes.
the data here, it just goes to 2019. What would it take to get these updated to include last year so the moving average reflects within my area? I've had 2 clubs in the same city that essentially lost their meeting places, and it really disrupted everything.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to know what happened this last year to have a better idea.
Sure, Frank. I can rerun those for you. The best I can do is rerun them using June 30th data.
Yep.
As you're painfully aware, that will erode by another 10, maybe 20 members. Yep. But I can run them on June 30th. They're not going to look a heck of a lot different, but there will be some differences. And of course, you had a couple clubs bite the dust this past year, yep. So they won't be in that group.
Well, you can't just go into a club without last year's data and expect to get compliance.
One of the reasons I decided to use this is that it is the data that's presently merged into your membership goal worksheets.
Well, it's a heck of a training tool. It's a heck of a tool.
Yeah. Now we could rerun those as well, but again, they'll move only slightly, in a few clubs. So what this MGI turned out to be was more simple than I expected. And it turns out that originally, and I kind of stumbled into this, originally the report I used to get this, which is called, oddly enough, the Member Viability and Growth Report, was only available on a 3-year span. So I said, okay, that's what I got. I've learned in years of business analysis that spreading out the time base does make things a whole lot smoother. It smooths out the ups and downs and things like you're describing this year, Frank. And so I picked this 3-year basis. Now, since then, they've fixed that report for me so that we can run it over 3, 2, or 1 year, or even just the current year. But the important thing to know, how did the club get where they are? What were the underlying ingredients? What were the underlying drivers that got the club where they are? Was it their attrition rate? Now, just as a reminder, the attrition rate is the average number of terminations versus the average size of the club. So again, 40-member club is a nice round number. 2 terminations a year in a 40-member club would be a 5% attrition rate. That'd be remarkably low. A more average attrition rate, say about 15, that'd be 6 members in the average 40-member club. Likewise, that same club would have to attract members at a rate of 6%. In other words, 6 new members on a base of 40 to hold their own. And of course, a couple more to grow. Your growth rate, of course, is your attrition rate minus your attraction rate, or the absolute value, the number of members attracted versus members lost. So let's look at your MGIs. And I'm going to try something here. I'm going to try my John Madden board and see if I get any use out of this. Let's see. There we go. Get to the right tools. Okay. So what I wanted to point out first is that now these are your green line clubs, the consistent growth clubs, and the yellow line clubs that are just kind of holding their own in the middle. But notice, let's talk about this whole attrition and frankly this retention myth. Take a look at these clubs. You only have a handful of clubs that have attrition rates that I'd be worried about. Now you might throw in Greenville Morning at 17%, but on this entire page, we've really only got 4 clubs that are in any worry whatsoever with respect to attrition. Now the color code there is anything above the district average, 14.0. Anything above the district average will be in red, so it sort of calls your attention to it. Now let's look for example at Aden. Aiden's kind of an interesting, they have managed their way down over time from 17 to 15 members. And they did that at a remarkably low attrition rate. There's something interesting about remarkably low attrition rates. That means that people like this club. They like each other. They stick around. Does it also mean that the club is taking advantage of that? Apparently not. The club has only attracted 2 members in the past 3 years. They've lost only 1 member in the past 3 years. But that's how you get into this sort of middle of the road malaise. Now, you can also think about that, considering that we've only had 1 person leave and 2 people join. The median age in that club has probably advanced exactly 1 year per year over those years. And these under 20 clubs, these smaller clubs, are truly in peril. Now, you look at somebody just to the north of them, above them, Farmville. Now, they figured some things out. They were almost in the dirt back several years back. They've gotten their way up to 14, but they haven't just knocked themselves out at it, frankly. You know, they've lost an average of a couple members a year, and they've added just barely more than that. That would be what? 7 members in a 3-year window. So what if instead of just finding 2 or 3 members a year, what if they'd just gone out and found 4 or 5? They'd still probably be losing 2, but they'd be up over 20. And part of that, I think, is just that it might be somewhere in the bylaws that the Rotary Club of Farmville shall be 13 members, or the Rotary Club of Aden shall be 15. These clubs get a mental model of their size, and they just can't shake it off. They fail to recognize that they are on the cusp of what I call the nuclear event, which is when the club gets down below single digits and it starts revolving around only 1 or 2 people.
Terry,
yeah, go ahead.
Example of that is Edenton. They're consistently below 60 or below because that's all they can fit in their room.
60 or below.
Yeah.
Which one?
Edenton.
Edenton. So they're managing their membership to their room size.
Correct.
Need another meeting.
You got to manage to something. What it suggests is that community is probably underserved by Rotary and deserves a satellite club. If a club is that strong that they're busting out of their room size,
we can have a separate discussion about Edenton,
okay,
but not here.
Yeah, they probably could deliver Rotary in a different way and do more good for their community.
Absolutely.
We talked about Snow Hill before we started, and of course, highly predictable. Y'all have seen this one coming. It's like a slow motion train wreck. But you don't lose any members for a 3-year window, but you don't add any either. That just is not a success formula. Let's take a look then at the red line clubs. These are the clubs that really do need some help on the borderline of intervention. And what you see here is some just huge red flags. And frankly, folks, I don't believe that we in Rotary have in general been forthright enough with our leaders, particularly our presidents. I'm guessing that a lot of these presidents really don't understand exactly where they are. When you're turning over 30% of your members a year, you're replacing the entire club every 3 years, or 27% replacing the club every 4 years, or 20% replacing the club every 5. You know, those are scary numbers. And clearly people are voting with their feet. They're in this group of clubs right in here, there is something wrong with the product. Those members are leaving for a reason. And if the club's serious about, and here's the other thing that was just mind-blowing to me, is I spent my year as governor focused on the smaller clubs because I knew they were killing us, and we moved that needle. What I failed to recognize until we built this model, I failed to recognize that just like you, I have 75 member clubs that used to be 75 members, now in the 50s, and I'm not worried about them because who's worried about a 50-member club? Well, in this particular case, there's something to worry about. Now, I'm just looking at the numbers. I'm not picking on anybody here. The numbers tell a story, which is, here's something that deserves a little bit more digging around and a little bit more figuring out as to just how we got to where we are. Then we have clubs, again, like Roanoke Rapids, okay? 5% attrition rate, exemplary. They only lose an average of 1 member a year. Of course, they only invite 2 members in 3 years to join the club. If a club like this simply invited 2 or 3 members a year and continued to lose 1, it's fairly predictable that they would be back above critical mass. And God knows it's so much easier to run a 25-member club than a 15-member club. So I implore you to figure out what the language is, what the story is, what the hook is. How do we get across to these clubs that these are not healthy places to be? You don't want to be in this continuing decline that gets you down to 12 or 10, or wild goose, I understand, rolled over. You know, Columbia is certainly predictable, as all of you well know. You know, how do we get this message across to folks? Any questions about the MGI data before we go on?
I'd just like to say that, you know, it's really indicative when I look especially at this page and see the member turnover, that I think a lot like you, Terry, during your year, I had a focus, but it was kind of off the mark. I didn't have the data. I didn't realize it was there and how to use it. So that's why, to me, we want this out in the AG and MA hands so that they can not present this data to a club, but with the history on the membership worksheet, the goal sheet worksheet, that they can understand when they're talking to a club that this is what the problem is. Look at your history here and have the data for that club. It says, this is how many people you're turning over every year.
You know, we didn't used to worry about 55 and 59 and 36 member clubs. We didn't realize the track they were on, because again, you know, our perspective and most of our data is only for the current year. We get past July 1st, we shake that off, we excuse ourselves for it, and we move right on. Well, in these particular clubs' cases, they've maintained pretty much this same downward glide path. I think I've told you before, I think you heard on the video that the classic downward glide path is 2 members a year. That seems to be within the threshold of pain of most clubs. If it's not any worse than that, they can excuse themselves and they can shake it off. And pretty much what you see here is that same glide path. That's how you get from 45 to 35 in a year, and that's how you get from 55 to 45 in the 5 years before that. Anyone else?
Terry, this is Russ. Is there anything in common among these clubs here? I know for the 2, Elizabeth City and Columbia, it's age and activity. They're older, they're dying out, and they're just not doing much in their communities. Is that the trend here?
Leadership and culture. Leadership and culture. What they haven't had is they haven't had a change agent. They haven't had a new sheriff show up in town and say, guys, I've looked at the data. 7 years ago, we were 61 members. Today, we're 36. If we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to be out of business. And just literally, you kind of grab the board by the collar and shake them a little bit. That's what it takes. Where I've seen clubs do dramatic turnarounds is what I call the lightning strike. And it's somebody beams into the club that just has a whole different mentality. And in many cases, they're from out of town as well. We have a little Rotary club down the road here at a town called Clover that was just, you know, it was just about to dry up and blow away. And a new sheriff showed up in town, joined Rotary. They made him president in a scary short period of time. And suddenly that club is just on fire. You know, they've grown like between 5 and 10 members a year for each of the subsequent years. He's not let up. We had another club that had managed their way down into the 20s. And a guy came in as president. He happened to own a business. He looked at the numbers. He recognized what was happening. And he said, we got to fix this. They grew themselves 30% in 1 year and then continued growing beyond that. It's just about leadership. When you dig into these clubs, what you'll find is it's not membership that's the problem. What they have is they have a dysfunctional leadership team. They have a dysfunctional board, and that is yielding a dysfunctional Rotary Club. Those are somewhat harsh words, but I could pretty much, I'd put money on any one of these clubs below this line right here, that is a dysfunctional leadership club, a dysfunctional leadership team in a dysfunctional club. And they've just been doing it that way so long, they don't know any better. If these guys could fix themselves, they would. I think that's why we have work. If these clubs could fix themselves, they would have done it already. They have no idea how to do that. And they need a fresh breath from somewhere else.
Terry, earlier on you had asked or mentioned that the COVID hasn't done very much for attrition. So far in our club, we've lost only one member because of that. We're attributed their leaving because of that.
Yeah.
However, we've had an influx of people requesting leave of absences.
Mm-hmm.
And that really concerns me some, because in the past when we've seen people that take leave after 6 months to a year, they sort of get out of the habit of being part of the club and they fade away and eventually leave. If that's the case, that's something that we may have problems whenever this pandemic corrects itself, and not sure what we can do or how we can even predict how bad that's going to get.
I don't know how to well, I can predict, and as you have, I can predict that half of those LOAs will result in terminations, and that would be optimistic. LOA, as you know, is just 1 foot out the door. Now, what I think can be done about that is, I've been surprised as I've looked at the what's called gallery view and Zoom of my club's now virtual meetings. We haven't met in person for months. But we've been having the same scheduled meetings. We meet twice a month, and now that's, of course, virtually. And interestingly, I've seen people on the Zoom meeting that I haven't seen at a club meeting in a year or two. And I really do think that putting together a good, solid, credible virtual meeting that's as good as a real club meeting, and making that available to the members, they don't even have to get in their car, you know. It's an hour and 15-minute experience. There's no meal involved, and people will participate in those. They will take those in. The next thing that happens is, as clubs actually somehow get back into operation, we've got a few, you probably do too. What we want to do is we want to be broadcasting a hybrid meeting. We don't want to just forget about those LOAs. We want to put a line out there so that they could somehow feel like they're still part of that Rotary Club and remember what it felt like, you know, when they did attend the Rotary Club. And so my number 1 and 2 recommendations would be high quality virtual meetings, and when you get back into the meeting room, hybrid meetings. And we've published a new guide on a technology guide on how to do that. You do not have to invent that for yourself. We figured that all out. It's a 7-page guide on how to get yourself into the hybrid meeting business. I'd highly recommend it.
Where's that available, Terry?
I have
3334.
If you go to zone 3334, which is the RI zones 33-34.org, and just type hybrid in the search box.
Okay, thank you.
Terry,
Yes.
I've got a Rotary Club that had a satellite club started, and you need 10 to get started. And during the pandemic, the regular club meets virtually, and the satellite club has failed to do that. And I think in retrospect, if a satellite club starts off at 10 and doesn't seem to have a view to getting to 20 anytime soon, they start acting and become treated like stepchildren of the parent club.
Mm-hmm.
They're not always included all the events. They don't attend all the events, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, we're really not in that club, but we don't know what we are. And I just would like to caution folks that the satellite club takes special people leading it, that have a view of what they're intended to be, their own club, so they can go their own direction.
It also takes energy, continued energy from the parent club.
Sure does.
Yeah, you literally have to have somebody that makes it to all their meetings
Yep.
for the better part of a couple of years to put a satellite on the map.
I totally agree with that. And it may
Yeah.
not always work, but yeah. Thank you, Jerry.
Absolutely true. Okay, anybody else? Let's look at boiling this down to its simplest. I was on the phone with Chris Jones today, who kind of coined this. He said, you know, if all you did was focused on keeping your attrition rate below 15%, and you set your bar at attracting members at a rate of above 20%, you couldn't miss. If a 40-member club attracts 8 members and loses fewer than 6, they're in great shape, and they will continue to moderately, not dramatically, not impressively, but moderately grow over time. So you can really boil a lot of this down to, you know, that average attrition rate. 15% is easier to calculate than 14. And if you just keep attrition below that rate, keep attraction above that rate, you really got the numbers figured out. We haven't seen anything in the external environment that explains either the growth or decline of a Rotary Club. We see 2 Rotary Clubs in the same metro area, in some cases meeting on the same main street on a different day at noon. And one of them's been in consistent decline for the last 15 years, and one of them's been consistently growing for the last 15 years. There's no explanation for that other than leadership and culture. Those reasons live right within the club, and there are things like attitudes, their culture, their strategies, their commitment, and to some extent execution. But really, it is the lack of will to put the Rotary Club back in business and get back to doing projects that matter to the community and so forth. So I think your challenge is you're the front line in the Army fighting our biggest enemy. And folks, that's not Kiwanis. Rotary's biggest enemy, in my book, is complacency. The simple satisfaction that our 14-member club is just fine, we're rocking along, we lose a member every now and then, and we gain a member every now and then, and we're just going to be okay. That is not true. That is not a sustainable scenario. Now, if you wonder if complacency is the right word, I looked up in my primary research source, Wikipedia, which says that is a feeling of quiet pleasure or security, often while unaware of some potential danger or defect. And I think that's part of our role, folks, is to take that potential danger or defect and unravel that quiet pleasure in some of these clubs that are clearly failing. We know they're failing. We've got the data, and some of them don't even realize it. So, simple set of takeaways. We can easily calculate attrition from available data. You've got to bring in members faster than you lose them. Chronic membership decline, I'll say once again, is a symptom of leadership dysfunction within the club. It's a dysfunctional leadership team resulting in a dysfunctional Rotary Club. And I've become convinced that I've worked on failing business organizations for my last 40 years of my career. And I've never found a failed business unit that fix itself. Now, think about it in your vocational experience. In every case, you've got to do something. In the corporate world, generally, we bring in a different leader that's got different assumptions, has had different experiences, and has some different ideas. If these clubs could fix themselves, they already would have. So let's kind of wrap up on this business of predictable success, predictable failure, and take any questions you have at this point. And then I'd like to move on to another topic, which I think is important. Anybody?
Good.
Okay. Yes? Okay, we have just been through, and those of you that are past governors have watched this. We have a self-imposed seasonality in our business because of our billing cycle. Clubs do exactly what you'd expect them to do if you say, I'm going to charge you for your membership on July 1st and on January 1st. They clear any questionable deadwood off their books ahead of that. But it's quite a dramatic effect. It actually happens in the last days or even hours of December and June. You can almost watch these reports. It's sort of like watching a stock ticker on Yahoo Finance. You can literally see the numbers move from hour to hour on that last day of June. Not taking account of this in Rotary causes us to be surprised and disappointed when in fact it's just built into the way we do business. So several years ago, we started looking at, well, what would it take to actually overcome that? And we coined this term, the success track, which is that the model is districts lose roughly a third of their membership in the last few days of December, and roughly 2%, another 2% of membership during the last few days of June. So what would it look like to build a model that says, well, here's the glide path we need to be on to overcome that? So for a 2,000 member district, the success track looks like this. 2,000 members, we need to grow up to 2% net gain or 40 member net gain by the 1st of December. We'll lose half of that. We know that. We'll get over it. And then we'll start building into the last half where we enter the 1st of June at least 2.5%, actually 3% for to have any kind of cushion, because we know we're going to lose a couple more percent of membership and end ourselves up at, say, plus 0.5%, which sadly is a measure of success in this business, 0.5% net gain. The other thing we need to get across to the clubs is that this continues through midnight in June. Now, what happens is, you've seen it, clubs get all self-satisfied in April or May when they see themselves up +1 or +2 members. And they haven't really looked at the data and realized that of their typical attrition, there's still 4 to go. There's still 4 people that are likely to leave that club statistically, and it almost always happens. I'm up +2. I'm surprised at the end of the year that I'm down net 2. So let's just look at some of your own district's history. And of course, these graphs are available online. This is what the success track looks like. So we need to go into July, into June 1st, up 37 members or 2.5%. Let's look at how that's worked out. The vertical bars are the historical performance of the club. Now you can see, of course, up in here, you can see the legend, okay? So the vertical bars represent each of the past years and just where we were at the beginning of the year, or at the beginning of the month. Now, this year, we got started pretty good, and then we faltered a little bit, but we went into December moderately positive, up about 1%. We lost the 1% we would have expected, and then unfortunately lost another 1.5% during an unprecedented slide in the months of not only December, but also going into January. And then of course that bottomed out a little bit. And the thing that is really impressive about this graph, is, including the current environment, y'all figured out a way to finish this thing as strong as it could have been finished. This growth rate at the end here is, in my view, remarkable. Of course, not soon enough and not big enough to get us into net membership gain zone, but a hell of an effort on you guys' part. Let's look though at the prior years in terms of, does this model really predict the future? Let's zoom in on those. Let's look first at 2015-16, where we made it to exactly 37 members net gain, and we declined in the month of June to exactly 7 members. We declined by exactly the 20 members that the model predicted. Uncanny, a poster child of the predictability of these membership declines in June and also, or in December and subsequently in June. Let's look at some other years. Here's another year, 2016-17, exactly the same slope. Came from exactly the same spot, which was essentially 0, and ended up at roughly -20. And then let's look at 18-19, almost exactly the same slope, slightly steeper, but after all, this is a model. The one exception, happily, was the 2017-18 year, where we weren't quite on the success track when we got into June, but we didn't have anywhere near as many casualties as we would have expected. I don't have any explanation at all for that. It wasn't typical of all districts. It's just something that happened in your district in terms of not taking the beating that you normally would. But seriously, for each of these other years, and of course, 2019-20 was exactly the same thing. You know, 2019-20, we went down right down that same path to exactly the same place. So this thing works, and it reminds us that we have to have years like 15-16 where we build our way up to that substantial net gain by June 1st in order to finish the year positive. So you need to go into December 1st with a net gain of 2%. You'll lose about half of that. You need to go into June 1st then with a net gain of about 2.5%. 3% would be a whole lot more comfortable. Now, the fact is that that 2% loss in June has actually, in the past couple of years, the past 2 years specifically, been in the 2.2 to 2.3 range. The June losses have been heavier in 18-19 and 19-20, only slightly by 0.3%, but 0.3% across the size membership base is a meaningful number. So, you know, a net gain of 3 by June 1st would be some insurance, but 2.5 will probably get you to net positive. So I wanted to move on. Any questions about that? We do have time if we need. If you pull out your membership goal setting worksheets, and one thing I want to talk about first is when you're working with your clubs in terms of setting goals, you know, unless we give an inexperienced club president some fabric against which to set a goal, you just don't know what they're going to do. So while they're not accountable to us, we can't tell them what to do, but we can challenge them. This membership challenge has been used in my district for the past 5 years, and it goes like this. If your club is over 25 members, here's our suggestion. Grow your club by 10 members or 10%, you take your choice. Now, if your club's below 25 members, which is a special case for reasons you know and understand, if your club's below 25 members, let's treat 25 members as the target, the place we want to be. And if we can get there in a year, fine. If we're so far away we can't see 25 from there, close the gap by half. Make a meaningful charge of forward progress on getting that club up to that 25 member sort of critical mass threshold. So that's our suggestion in our district. This is also baked into the Carolinas Pets material, and it is a suggestion for how clubs might approach goal setting. One thing that we know doesn't work is you say, well, if all 40 clubs in the district just grew themselves by 1 member, we'd be up 40. Wouldn't that be great? We haven't been up 40 in as long as we can remember. Well, it would be great, but it doesn't work, because if that's the sum total of challenge to the great clubs is to grow by 1, you're going to get killed by the clubs that didn't grow by any and the clubs that declined. So you really do have to have your stronger clubs looking at a little bit higher target than grow by +1. So the membership goals worksheets that you have, those are actually produced in the end of May, 1st of June. And the important numbers, there are only 3 really important numbers on this page for these clubs. The first, of course, is their annual attrition rate, in this club's case, 18%, and their annual attraction rate, in this club's case, 4.2%. Would somebody be willing to unmute themselves and tell us what problem this club needs to solve. The problem we need to solve is, take a chance.
We need to start attracting more than we're losing.
More than people. That's it.
We need to attract more than we're losing, and we're losing a few more than we ought to.
We're
Right.
losing 1 in 7.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got a retention rate issue, but I mean, not fatal, but surely if we could get this, attrition rate down to 12 or 14%, that'd be members we don't have to replace. But I can guarantee you that a club attracting members at a rate of less than 10% is shrinking. Just take that to the bank. If a club is regularly attracting members at a rate of less than 10%, because I've already told you that 10% is a world-class attrition rate. It's just impossible to grow a Rotary Club with an attraction rate of less than 10%. So let's scroll down to the bottom of the worksheet. Now, one of the first things I have to ask you to do is correct my mistake, which is this first line is not line A. This is practice to file your taxes in case you haven't. There's 2 days left. Actually, just remark line A is the July 1 membership that we're working from, okay? That works into the rest of the math down the form. So the first thing we want to do is we want to fill in the estimated membership July 1. Now that's pretty easy to do because July 1 is now in the rearview mirror. I'll show you on the next page where to go easily find that. I have, for your district, I have reloaded the June 30th start figures into DACDB where you can easily retrieve them. So the start figures in DACDB are right on the money as far as the June 30th data is concerned. Again, there'll be a couple clubs here and there where that varies by 1 member. So in this club, I'm guessing they probably ended up, by and large, somewhere around 21 members. So first question is, where did we start? Second question is, where are we headed? What is our membership goal at the end of the year? In this club's case, looked to me like they could nominally 10%, 9% net gain would get them to 23 at the end of the year. That's not very optimistic. That's not very aggressive. They could surely easily get to 25 with a little bit of effort, but let's give them 23. So the question is, okay, what does that take? And it takes, of course, 2 members that we know we don't have right now. So it takes 2 members to accommodate the growth goal. But then most importantly, and this is the thing we got to get across to these presidents. Yes, people are going to quit the club the year you are president. And in this particular case, I can fairly well predict that 5 of them will. So this club of 22 members actually needs 7 new members to get to its 23 member goal. Now, if they somehow figure out how to hold on to 1 or 2 more, that'd be great. But if I was charging my membership chair with what we needed to do in order to meet our goals this year, I'd say, Charlie, we need 7 new members. Let's go find them. Remembering the 10-3-1 rule, for those 7 members, it's going to take something on the order of 70 conversations to get something like 20 people to actually take a look at the club in order to bring those 7 members on board. Any questions about the worksheet? I'm hoping this would be a way to sit down, particularly with these ultra high attrition clubs, and just illustrate, gee, what if you could get that 22% attrition rate down to 12? How much easier would that make it? And this is where you find that data on DACDB. If you go to the home page, the home tab in DAC, and you scroll down to district statistics. This is the one you want to use, is district statistics, not district dashboard. And one of those widgets is called net member change. And the net member change widget has a June 30th column that is now uploaded of exactly your club's June 30th member counts. Got that done over the weekend. So it's an easy place to go find June 30th membership data.
Thanks for doing that, Terry.
And that's what I had for you. I'd be happy to answer some questions. We've got a couple of minutes left.
I wanted to add an observation that I've gleaned over the last year or two. And when you talk about the vitality of a club or the lack of it, it has to do with leadership and culture. And I was looking at some of the numbers of the specific clubs in 7720. And the one that I honed in on was Murfreesboro, which had about, their 5-year was in the 20, if I recall, it was about in the 22 member range for a number of years, it was 20 member range. Then it went up in 17-18 to 22. And then in 18-19, it went to 27. And then last year it was showing back to about 22. And what that told me was that there was probably a president who came in and had great leadership skills and got the club moving. So they added 2 members that year and then another 5 members the next year. But then last year they fell off. Now what that says is that you can have a dynamic president who can encourage membership growth in the club, but if it only lasts for 1 year, that's not an effective membership growth culture. And it has to be a sustained membership drive within the club itself. And it has to continue year after year rather than being a 1-year push. And so for clubs that are able to develop that membership growth mentality and to have attention given to membership and the condition of membership, I think that it'll be easier to have a consistent moderate growth rate than to have spikes.
Actually, Murfreesboro is an interesting case study because they have a really strong Rotaract club at Chiltern University.
90 members.
What impact will that have on their parent club membership?
Murfreesboro is about 80% faculty of the university. And 2 years ago, we asked them to start encourage. They recognized that they needed more members of their general community in the club. And they made some strong efforts to do that. And I think they disenfranchised the exclusivity of the university association among some of the members. And it sort of hurt them. They changed who they were midstream. And I'm not saying they made a mistake. They just needed to continue that progress, getting members of their general community in the club. And they ran into a wall. They've had some leadership leave town because they changed jobs. The assistant governor left that was in that club. It was a lot of chaos. And interestingly enough, all of these small clubs, a little bit of chaos is a lot of chaos to them. A club of 95 loses a member or 2 to their key, and they have a strong supporting staff because of culture and survive it. It's hard to get universal culture in a small club. Terry, maybe other parts of the country are like us, but we are just so spread out that Greenville's our biggest city, essentially, with 40,000 people. The rest of us, maybe a big town has 20,000. Hertford's got 2,000. Columbia's got 800 people in a county of 4,000. I have encouraged Columbia to change their name to the Terrell County Rotary Club, but it would give them 5 times as many potential members, but it's still not going to help. A town of 5,000 couldn't have maybe a 40-member club. They need to consider that, but the average members, Stan, what would you say, 85 years old? You're on mute, Stan. They get a few new members. Here's the other thing. If you want to change culture, you don't bring in people one at a time. You bring them in pairs so they can look at each other across the room and identify, oh, there is someone like me here.
Yeah.
Whether that's a minority, a woman, or a younger person, whatever you're trying to bring in your club, you can't just bring one because they feel alienated.
Well, you
Whatever
can't
your diversity strategy is, you need to have critical mass of that
Yep.
represented group.
So average person goes to the Columbia Club and they feel bad if they didn't come in on a walker. And that, I mean,
It's very true. Yeah. They are unique in that sense. They are probably our oldest average age club.
Yeah.
Well, the name of that game has been addressed to some extent by a new tool that we've just gotten from RI, which is actually some demographic mapping. So we can take a look. It's not true that that every that every census unit within your district is shrinking. Some are growing, and you know where they are. And in some of them, we don't have Rotary clubs. And rather than try to grow Rotary in a county of 4,000 people, and I know what you're talking about. I mean, the county where I grew up in western Kansas now has 4,000 people, and probably more geography than your county, I'm guessing. But that's rural America is going out of business, and we probably need to focus on some areas where literally they're underserved by Rotary.
Yeah.
good point.
Anybody else have a question? Comment?
You are the front line in the war against our biggest enemy, which is not Kiwanis.
Yeah. So we appreciate your participation. To me, it gets more interesting every time I hear Terry talk, because I understand it now.
I first heard him stand, gosh, 3 or 4 years ago, the zone membership thing. It was the best one I ever saw. I said, this is great. So let's put it into practice. Let's start challenging some clubs and let's change this culture. It's a long process. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. We need to start.
What's the worst that can happen? Somebody's going to get pissed off. If the club's going to fail anyway, let's get it over with.
Right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for your time, Terry.
You bet. Thanks for your hospitality.
Good to see you here, and thank you for joining our group.
Appreciate your attention.
Any guys?
Good night. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Thank you, everybody.
Claudia, thanks for being here. Dale, thank you. Russ, Frank,
Take care.
all of you being here.
Thank you, Stan.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys.
Ed, thank you. Sarah,
Okay.
thank you.